Let's talk about a band that's a total paradox. They never had a hit single. They barely sold any records, and their whole career burned out in less than a decade. And yet, their sound became the absolute blueprint for an entire genre of music. That sludgy, sun-baked, heavy-as-hell rumble you hear in rock today, a lot of that started right here. This is the story of Kyuss, the undisputed pioneers of stoner rock. So that's the big question, isn't it? How did a bunch of kids from what felt like the middle of nowhere, a band that broke up right as they were getting really good, end up becoming one of the most influential rock bands of the entire 1990s? Okay, let's get into it. See, to really get Kyuss, you have to understand where they came from. Their story doesn't start in a garage or a club. It starts in an environment. We're talking about the sprawling, desolate, blistering heat of Palm Desert, California, back in the late 80s. This was not some cool music hub like LA or Seattle, nope. This was a place defined by intense heat, endless sand, and, a pretty deep sense of isolation. So for young musicians like Josh Homme, John Garcia, and Brant Bjork, there were no clubs, no venues, no place to play. If they wanted a scene, they were going to have to build it themselves, literally from the ground up. And their solution? Man, it was pure genius. The now legendary generator parties. They would literally drag gas-powered generators way out into these remote spots in the Mojave Desert, set up all their gear, and just play all night long. These weren't just gigs. They were these wild communal events that became the very crucible where Kyuss forged their massive, earth-moving sound. And as frontman John Garcia said, it was all born out of necessity. I mean, think about it. Out in the desert, there are no rules, no sound complaints from the neighbors, and definitely no authority figures telling you to turn it down. It was total freedom. But that kind of freedom, in that huge, empty space, it demanded a sound that was big enough to actually fill it. So let's talk about how that unique environment created a sound that was just completely new. This landscape didn't just shape their attitude, it was literally baked right into their music, creating this powerful new breed of heavy rock. So they start out in '87 as a band called Katzenjammer, which, by the way, is German for hangover. Pretty cool. By '89, they'd rebranded to Sons of Kyuss, a name they lifted straight from an undead monster in an advanced Dungeons & Dragons manual. Yeah, you heard that right. Before finally, in 1991, just shortening it to Kyuss. Now your first thought is probably, okay, so they sound like Black Sabbath. And you wouldn't be wrong, that's definitely in there. But here's the twist that made them so different. The other half of their DNA was pure punk rock. The guys in the band always said they were even more influenced by bands like Black Flag. They took that raw, do-it-yourself punk attitude, but they slowed it way, way down. It was like punk rock melting in the desert heat. And their key sonic weapon came from guitarist Josh Homme. He basically invented what you could call his low-end theory. See, to make a sound big enough to fill that empty desert, he'd tune his guitar way down to C standard. And then, this is the crucial part, he'd run it through bass amps. The result wasn't just heavy, it was a physical force. It was this seismic, fuzzy, all-encompassing rumble that felt as vast and gritty as the landscape itself. It sounded like the earth cracking open. And this incredible, groundbreaking sound was captured across 4 studio albums that, in just a few short years, would become like sacred texts for a whole new generation of heavy music fans. Think about this for a second. In just 4 years, they dropped their entire studio discography. They started with the raw debut Wretch, then quickly evolved with the absolute genre-defining Blues for the Red Sun, followed by the expansive masterpiece Welcome to Sky Valley, and finally, their last, almost prophetic statement, And the Circus Leaves Town. And the creative engine behind their most iconic work was this classic lineup. You had Josh Homme on guitar, John Garcia's almost shaman-like howl on vocals, Brant Bjork's absolute powerhouse drumming, and Nick Oliveri's chaotic bass. And even after Oliveri left, the equally amazing Scott Reeder stepped in, really solidifying the sound for their last couple of albums. Their 1994 album, Welcome to Sky Valley, is a perfect example of their whole vibe. It actually came with instructions in the liner notes that said, listen without distraction. And they weren't kidding. The album was structured as 3 distinct suites of songs that flowed into each other. They were basically forcing you to experience it as one single immersive piece of art, not just a collection of singles. But here's where the story gets really strange. With all this critical acclaim piling up, their sound more powerful than ever, a huge paradox emerged. In 1995, at the absolute peak of their powers, the band just stopped. They completely imploded. From the time they formed as teenagers to their very last show, the band's entire wildly influential career lasted only 8 years. That's it. Josh Homme explained the philosophy behind the breakup years later, and it's pretty fascinating. He saw it as an act of preservation. Instead of letting the band slowly fizzle out and get worse, he felt it was better to just end it right at its creative peak. The truth is, years of nonstop touring, burnout, and just growing in different creative directions, it had all taken its toll. But of course, a story this good doesn't just end there. In 2010, a few of the original members got back together as Kyuss lives and were playing to these huge, adoring crowds. But this led to a pretty messy lawsuit from Homme and Reader over the rights to the name, which eventually forced the reunited guys to rebrand as Vista Chino. It was a complicated chapter that just proved how much passion and, well, fracture still remained. So despite the short career and all that internal conflict, Kyuss left behind this absolutely massive legacy that continues to shape rock music to this day. They've often been called the velvet underground of heavy metal, and honestly, it's the perfect analogy. They didn't sell a ton of records, but it really feels like every single person who bought one went out and started their own band. So let's be clear, they are, without a doubt, the pioneers. They defined the entire sound and attitude of what we now call stoner rock and desert rock. And in doing so, they gave birth to a global scene of bands, all chasing that same fuzzy, hypnotic, heavy groove. And if you need any proof, just look at this family tree. It's staggering. From the ashes of Kyuss and the whole Palm Desert scene they built, you got this incredible explosion of bands. Of course, there's the massive success of Queens of the Stone Age, the punk rock energy of Mondo Generator, the desert grooves of Fu Manchu. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Their musical DNA is absolutely everywhere in modern rock. And I think ultimately why they matter so much is because of the context. You have to remember, this was the 1990s. The entire music world was obsessed with the rainy, flannel-wearing grunge scene in Seattle. And then here comes Kyuss, offering a totally different kind of rebellion. It was vast, it was weird, and it came straight from the sun-scorched earth. They proved that groundbreaking heavy music could come from anywhere and sound like nothing else on the planet. Their story is really the ultimate proof that commercial success has absolutely nothing to do with true influence. And it kind of leaves you with a final thought, right? What other supposedly unsuccessful artists are out there who are secretly the architects of the music that you love today?